I'd love it if you could give it up for John Darton and Nicole, and for Charlene Hunter-Gault, who I think just, did you exit out the door yet? You're the best at this, absolutely. And Anderson Cooper as well, of course, so thank you. It's a point of pride that in recent years, no fewer than 3 of my colleagues at The New Yorker, Nick Lemon, Jelani Cobb, and Graciela Mochkovsky, have led major schools of journalism in this city. And I once asked Nick what the most difficult part of the job was, and his answer came quickly. Table 47, he said. He went on to explain you'd be surprised at how many awards, lunches, and dinners there are in the profession of journalism. Which is fair enough, but even if we journalists are not exactly allergic to self-celebration, I think we can agree that it's been a privilege to be here today at an occasion in which the awards are named not for a publisher, but for a reporter. George Polk's legacy is reflected in the frontline bravery of Lindsay Addario, Christian Amanpour, and my colleagues Alma Guillaume-Prieto, Luke Mogelson, and Masha Gessen. It's reflected in the investigative rigor of Woodward and Bernstein, Bartlett and Steele, Laurie Garrett, Marty Barron, Dean Baquet, who clearly had the same haircut I did in high school, Laura Poitras, and my friend Cy Hirsch. It's reflected in the work of Nicole Hannah-Jones, who was forced to shift in the national thinking about race and history, and editors such as Paul Steiger and Gene Roberts, who have long inspired young reporters to extend themselves beyond their seeming capacities. And it honors Wilbert Rideau, who endured for so long the cruelty of mass incarceration, and yet who possessed the endurance to expose the cruelties of Angola and the wider system of American imprisonment. I'm especially happy to see the author of In the Place of Justice here today. Finally, the directors of the Polks have also found it in their heart to encourage an editor whose courageous and discerning selection of talking dog cartoons is, I think we can all agree, unparalleled in the history of American journalism. So thank you very much for that. The blaring reality of American journalism is that we no longer live in the fleeting post-war era that helped make newspapers and magazines and networks fat and happy, prosperous enough to do the work, but demanded of them, at least in retrospect, with little sense of crisis. We are now in a very perilous state. The forest has been thinned. So many outlets, particularly local and regional outlets, have been trimmed, then cut, then slashed, and then all too often shuttered completely. And the outlets that have risen up in their place are a mixed bag. For every ProPublica or Marshall Project, there are so many of dubious quality, underreported, under-edited, and all too often propagandistic and even hateful. At the very same time, and the timing is hardly coincidental, we approach a national election in which one of the leading contenders is an unapologetic authoritarian, someone of disturbing talent and no shame, a political egoist who shows contempt for the free press and deploys an increasingly sophisticated strategy to undermine it. On so many issues, in so many ways, this is a moment of real peril, and it's hard to imagine that the responsibility of the press has ever been greater. And so it's hardly a bad thing for us to take a moment today to remind ourselves of the astonishing work that reporters are capable of by honoring particularly younger journalists who are here today and getting the real awards. And for once, maybe we ought to say a word about the responsibility of owners. Their responsibility is to say the least, no less enormous than ours as reporters and editors. I've been lucky to work for 2 owners, the Graham family and the Newhouses. And I've known only respect, support, material, and journalistic. Long ago, when I started this job, I realized I had in hand for the first time a piece that was pretty hot stuff. It was true, it was checked, it was lawyered. But as a complete rookie, I did not quite know what to do next. Owner-wise, I mean. The piece was by Mr. Hirsch, in fact, and it accused, not surprisingly, many officials of many grand offenses. But finally, I remembered that Ben Bradley would call Katharine Graham. They had what was called a no surprises rule. And if he was going to burn down the house, it seemed fair that he alert the person who has the deed. I'm fairly certain that I learned about this in the movies. So I called Cy Newhouse. I told him what was what. I uttered all the accurate assurances I could think of. And after a long silence, a very, very long silence, he said, "It sounds very interesting. I look forward to reading it." I was entirely green, but not entirely dense. I got the message. Get it right and publish. And I never made a call like that again. Not all owners, as recent history has shown, are quite so supportive, materially or editorially. Even the well-padded among them too often are quick to turn off the spigot and just as quick to back off the story for fear of legal and reputational reprisals. This kind of winsome behavior makes a reporter anxious and unlikely to do his or her job with the required obsession. A.J. Liebling, who was the press critic for The New Yorker in the 1940s and 50s, wrote that the pattern of a reporter's life is like the plot of Black Beauty. Sometimes he finds a kind master who gives him a dry stall and an occasional bran mash in the form of a Christmas bonus. Sometimes he falls into the hands of a mean owner who drives him in spite of terrible injury and expects him to live on potato peelings. I think it's not an act of obsequiousness if we thank those very small and select tribe of owners who actually know that while they are engaged in a business, they are above all joined in a cause. Reporting, as George Polk would have told us, is all that. It's a cause. Wilbert Rideau honors that cause. The reporters at grave risk today in Gaza and in Sudan and in Mexico and Ukraine honor that cause. Evan Gershkovich, both in his work and now for more than a year in Lefortovo prison, honors that cause. Honest, fearless, accurate reporting, like democracy itself, demands our devotion and our protection. And for that reason, and for that sense of solidarity, it's an honor and deeply encouraging to have been here among you today. Thank you very much.